Hi everybody, welcome back to Julia at Home. I am Julia. Today's video is going to be on United States geography. I'm a homeschooling mom of 4. We did United States geography while my son was in first grade and my daughter was in third grade. And of course I had the baby and toddler around, but this is really aimed at elementary age children. We spent a whole school year, I think it ended up being a little longer than the school year, on this, and I have a lot of resources. So I'm going to link as many of the resources I can in the description box below. Some of those are affiliate links, so that means it doesn't cost you any extra, but I get a little bit. So if you do decide to use those, I thank you. I will also be making chapters, so you can check below if you want to skip ahead to a certain section. In addition, I'm going to try to provide a shareable link with this document that I made that has basically the list of what I did in order. So let me talk through first what we did as far as my lesson procedure, and it's actually written up in here. We worked by region. So at first I did a large just overview study, and then we went region by region. We did such as New England, Midwest, Pacific Northwest. We learned what all the states were in that region, and I highlighted a few states from each region with books. Hopefully that makes sense. It should make more sense as we go. So once we got past the introductory bit, I would introduce the region on the first day of that. We would find states on the map, do map drill. We would read about the states in our encyclopedias. I have either one or both encyclopedias. I will share those with you. We'd read a page in our United Tweets of America, do coloring pages, look at physical geography features, and draw something in our geography journal. So one of my most important resources was these maps I got. I got 2 of them so that each of my older children could have their own. And they are Chalkboard outlines of the United States. And these are from Chock-full of Design. I am going to link them below. Since I bought these, they closed and then reopened under new ownership. So I will link to these if they still have them. But these were great, and what we would do is map drill. So when we're first learning a state, we'd find it on a map in our encyclopedia, which I will show you next. And I actually chose it for them because we were highlighting certain ones at certain times. So they'd have to color in those states, and then we would go over it several times in a row with me calling out the names of a state and them coloring it in and showing me. But we used this every time we did geography, and sometimes we did this on its own without doing other books as well. So this is my most used resource. I used 2 different encyclopedias, and you really only need one. And if you're only going to get one, I would actually suggest this one here. It's the National Geographic United States Encyclopedia. It also goes by region here. And so that was really helpful for me. For the Northeast, you first have an introductory map showing the Northeast, and then another pretty page here that has a nice picture and some just general information. So I would start with those. Now, the Northeast, I actually split into New England and the Mid-Atlantic. So I will be talking about them that way, but I did go ahead and read this when we started. And we started with New England because that's where we live. And then for each state alphabetically in that region, they have a couple pages as well. And they always have this like kind of timeline, a page of just text. They have a map and other information here. So this is my favorite one. It is a little long, so we found that if we were short on time or just I was getting tired or the kids were getting tired, I would do the other one I'm going to show you because it is shorter. If we were really ambitious, we'd do both. But most of the time, we just used this one. This is the 50 states, and this is a really fun book. And it does have all the states. You can kind of see it's got the big map in here. And then it just goes, I believe, alphabetically. So it doesn't have like the regional information. So this one's gonna start with Alabama. And it's just got kind of a fun, more of a fun, more cartoony version of the map, and then some basic information. So you can see it's a lot shorter to read. And so if you have younger kids or you just don't have the time or energy or whatever to read through all the rest, this is a really good start. And but I just found it didn't have as much information as the other one. So I went with the other one for the most part. And I think the other one has more like physical features and the maps are a little more accurate and detailed. So that's why that's my favorite, but this is also just a really fun book. The other book we used pretty much every time is this United Tweets of America book, and this is just fun. We actually, at the beginning of the year when we started geography, we're also studying birds, so I thought it was a fun tie-in. But this is just a fun book. You could just read through this book. It's kind of supposed to be like a competition where the bald eagle is hosting and all the different state birds are kind of competing. And there's a lot of states that actually have the same birds. So we went through at some point and I think figured out which, but I can't remember which bird had the most. There's a few in contention for the most states. The northern flicker is actually one. But so it goes through alphabetically different states and their state bird, and it has some, just a few fun facts. And so this is totally not necessary, but it's kind of a fun addition that we used. The other book we used regularly was this United States of America coloring book. I'm sure there's probably more different kinds of United States coloring books. This is just the one I happened to get, so that you get an idea of what it looks like. This is Louisiana here. And that's kind of, they all look pretty similar as far as they have the outline of the state, and then they have usually some animals and plants related to them there. Now I have a few books that I just used kind of throughout when I felt like it, if that makes sense. This was like great idea, but poor execution on my part. This is United Tastes of America, and it's a recipe from each state. And I think this is just a totally cool concept. And I'm keeping this book so I can make some of these, but I didn't actually get to it while we were doing it. But for example, so it's got like eating in Alaska here. And then I believe there's a recipe from Alaska. So this one happens to be smoked salmon cream cheese spread. So it's just fun. We also have the National Parks of the USA. This is the same publisher as the 50 States books. I have several of their books. I really like them. They're beautiful. And this has, I would just pull it out when, you know, we had states that had the parks in them. So for example, the Everglades here are in Florida. So when we did Florida, we pulled this out and looked at this, and it just helps give more of a sense of the state. We also have 50 adventures in the 50 states. And I think I picked this up because it was on sale, and we did look through it a little bit, but this was not one that we used super much, but I also wanted to share it with you because this could be fun. If you are like a road schooling family, one day I want to do a road trip, but not right now. So I think this could be really fun to take with you and see how many of these you can do. Yeah, like this is Float the Charles River on the 4th of July for Massachusetts. Yeah, so this could be really fun. You could also just read through it. You don't have to like actually do the things. It does, again, give you more of a sense of that state. Now on to some general books and resources that I used at the beginning. Again, this is a very resource heavy video, so feel free to look in the description below. All right, so we started with a couple books. One is How to Make a Cherry Pie and See the USA. And it's just fun. It's like not super informative, but I thought it was a good introduction. It's also good for like, what do you need to make a pie? Where does it all come from? So yeah. And then we have the Scrambled States of America. And this comes with a game. So I got the book and the game here. And the book is just a silly story about how the states get kind of bored where they are and they want more adventure. And so they start switching places with one another and everything gets all confused. And then you can guess that by the end, they kind of wanted to go home. And the game is really fun. And I waited until we were a little bit into our study before playing the game. But you don't really need to know anything about the states with this one to play it. Let me just give you show you quickly. There's easy and hard versions. It gives each player has a map to help them out. So it's a really good learning device in that way. And then there's cards with states on them, and it gives you all the information on the states. So this is a little bit tough for the pre-readers. We do help my son with this game because he's not as strong in reading as for this yet. But I think that's perfectly fine, and it doesn't really affect the gameplay. And then there's different kind of things you're looking for in other cards. So this one, the state has the same number of letters. The state has the same number of letters as capital. There's all different kinds of one. There's some that's like distance cards, and so you have like a specific state out, and then you have to find the state that's closest to that card. This state has 10 or more letters in its name. So it's just kind of random things. You don't need to know the geography to play, but it definitely helps you learn it. So that's whether or not you're doing a United States Geography unit. I actually recommend this as a fun educational game. We also love Professor Noggin's games, and this one you do have to know a little bit more, so I would recommend just waiting a little bit. Although there was a lot of stuff in here that we didn't necessarily learn in our study. Some of it we did. And so we learned just by playing the game as well. And we enjoy playing Professor Noggin's over dinner, actually. It's fun. I also wanted to mention Ticket to Ride. Obviously, in my family, we are fans of this game. So we have the original here, which has a map of the United States. Okay, so in case you don't know, you're basically building train routes across, kind of competing for some of them and seeing if you can get certain routes, give you certain points, and you want a long route as well to get the longest for extra points. And then there's this first journey one, which is really good for pre-readers. Although honestly, we do this one with our pre-readers too and just help them. But this is really good for the younger set. I'm not sure, it says ages 6+. We always play games younger than it says. So, I mean, I was just thinking that maybe my 3-year-old would like to play this, so we'll see. It does have, they all have small pieces. The pieces in this are a little bit bigger, so less chokeable size than the pieces in this, which are definitely chokeable and losable size. The bottom one here is Rails and Sails, and it uses both ships and trains, and one side is the world, and the other side is the Great Lakes, which is actually my favorite map to play on. So yeah, if you're interested, you like to play games, these are really good ones. And then I have a couple poetry books here. This is Home, A Journey Through America. Let me show you. And it's, there's different poets and writers and such that wrote poems about America, and it's paired with Thomas Locker pictures, and I love his paint. I think they're paintings, and I love them. So that's a John Muir to go with the waterfall. So I would just like sprinkle these in. We didn't do like the whole book straight through. Earth Under Sky Bears Feet, which is Native American poems of the land, and it's also Thomas Locker. But it's different tribes, poems translated from different tribes, and it tells you the name of the tribe and also where they're from, whatever the country on there. So yeah, again, sprinkled these in. Before I jump into the different regions, I have a few more resources generally that I want to share with you. The first are puzzle maps. So I have, see if I can show you without spilling. I have this Montessori puzzle map for the United States. And I like it because each puzzle piece is shaped like the state. It looks really easy, but if you take them all out at once, it's really not. That's a fun tactile way to get them involved in the different states. There are probably many different United States puzzle maps. This happens to be one that was gifted to us, so I didn't go and look for another one. In this one, the shapes of the puzzle pieces are not the shapes of the states, but it is a beautifully done puzzle. I am a fan in general of Melissa and Doug. Things, they tend to be good quality. So, puzzles. Okay, we're finally getting to the regions, and we started with New England because that is where we live. So I'm going to be looking at my cheat sheet that should be linked below. And New England includes Vermont, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. So we started with Vermont because that is where we live, and so I have more books on Vermont. The first book we have is M is for Maple Syrup. Now there is a series of these books, and you will see them a lot because I think they have them for every state, and there's some that have them for capital cities. Like I think we have a Chicago one, and there's some that are also numbers that go with different states. So just so you know, they're in here a lot, this series. The way they're organized is A is for something, and you could just read this here, and it's just kind of like an alphabet picture book about that state, and most of the time I read mostly these, and then they have more information about that thing that they mentioned on the sides here, and then they often also have other information as well. So you can see that, and yeah, and again, it goes A through Z. Z is always interesting because there's not always great things for Z. But yeah, so we start with this one, and also if you look online, I was able to find, at least for this one, and I assume they have them for others, there's like study guides that you can get that are available if you wanted to use those in conjunction with this. This is a really fun Vermont book just because it is like just highlights a lot of random things you would think of Vermont for. And Champ, in case you don't know, Lake Champlain lies between Vermont and New York State, and Champ is a mythical lake monster that's said to live in the lake. So we like to believe in Champ, and so this is a fun book. It's kind of cartoony, and it's about a girl that goes to a maple tree, or apple tree, yeah. Maple tree, and she discovers Champ, and then her and Champ have lots of adventures together, and there's cheese and maple syrup and apples, and snow and all sorts of fun things that you would think of Vermont for in there. Next we have Snowflake Bentley. The dust cover was lost from this one. It's an older book, but Snowflake Bentley, I think he lived in the late 1800s. But he took pictures, might have been early 1900s, I'm not 100% sure on my timing. But he took pictures of snowflakes, actually, and recorded them and drew them. And he created a book of beautiful photographs of snowflakes. You can go find it online if you would like. And yeah, and so we read the book about him, because again, he's in Vermont. And we've actually also gone to the Snowflake Bentley Museum, which is near where he used to live. The 1-year-old wants to share with you too. So at Grandpa's Sugar Bush, I've had this book for a long time. I pulled it out for Vermont because there's a lot of maple syrup making here, and this would also work for, I know there's other states that also do maple syrup. So I don't know exactly where the author was or is and where this takes place, but it worked for Vermont, so I used it for that. And I also have Hey Hey Hey, which would also work for a lot of different states that have a lot of farming. I believe this author is from Vermont. We happen to live in the area of Vermont where there is a lot of farming, and we have a dairy farmer who we allow to grow and harvest hay from around our property. So we see it in action, so I thought this would be a fun book to include. And yes, it's always a very exciting day when they come to hay. The kids stop what we're doing and we look out and we watch them. So, and then I also have these little books that I think were gifted to us at some point. There's Goodnight Vermont and Hello Vermont, and they probably have these for all sorts of states and maybe even countries. So if you have little ones and you want, you could get them those. Moving on to the rest of New England, I don't have books for every state, but I do have them for several more. Starting with Connecticut, it is where I grew up, and my parents and some of my siblings still live there, so we had to do that. We have N is for Nutmeg, because Connecticut is the nutmeg state, in case you did not know. And then it's the same series as M is for Maple Syrup. And then I got Noah Webster and His Words, because he was from Connecticut. So you can see here, I like to look at, you know, books in general about the state. That's why this series is so great, because there's a lot of general information that we could then build on there if you want to explore more. I like to get biographies of people that are from the state, and then like if there's certain features of the state, you'll see some of those later. So that's kind of my formula for this. I do have some books for Maine, and I couldn't find one this morning. So I have One Morning in Maine, which is by Robert McCloskey, and it's Blueberries for Sal I also have and used. I just can't seem to find it right now. He also wrote that. And this is, I believe, like Sal older with a younger sister, I believe. And so it's a beautiful story about life in Maine, kind of an isolated Maine island, possibly, on the shore. So it's beautiful. And Blueberries for Sal, classic. You should just get it from the library if you haven't read it yet, because I love it. Okay, and then I have Miss Rumphius by Barbara Cooney, which is another one of my absolutely favorite books ever. I like to gift this one at baby showers because I just love the message of it. It's basically just find one small thing that you can do to make the world a better place, and Miss Rumphius chose planting lupine, so she's the lupine lady. And I also love flowers, so that might impact me here, but I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful story. And then for Massachusetts, I have Make Way for Ducklings, because it is a classic, and it's another Robert McCloskey. And it just, like, you can kind of feel Boston with it. And there's so many more books, of course, that you can include here. I had to kind of pick and choose. Okay, moving on. Our next region is the Mid-Atlantic, and this includes New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, New Jersey, and Delaware. I have books on most, but not all of those states. We're gonna start with New York. I started with, again, the same series. E is for Empire, which is a New York state alphabet. Then I have a couple books about New York City. This one is A Walk in New York. This is the only one that's really on New York City. This one here is called Her Right Foot. And so it's about the Statue of Liberty, which is in New York City, or the harbor, I suppose. But it's about kind of the story of how she got there. And yeah, it's a nice story and talks about the whole relationship with France and all that. So yeah, I thought because we're studying United States geography, I should tie in the Statue of Liberty. So I did. And the final one from New York is actually a Where Is book. Where is Niagara Falls? My grandparents lived by Niagara Falls from before I was born till they died. So I've been a couple times, and I think my two older ones have been once, but we haven't gotten there with the younger ones yet. And we will one day, but I definitely wanted to read a little bit about it. Next is Pennsylvania. I also have some ancestry from Pennsylvania, so I want to learn more about that, but we didn't focus on that this time. K is for Keystone, is the Pennsylvania version of this book in the series. And then I have Raising Yoder's Barn, which is kind of a traditional barn raising. I wanted to emphasize, I know there's quite a few Amish communities there, and this has beautiful pictures, just like a really nice story. So the barn gets struck by lightning. That's not the good part, but the good part is that after it burns down, the community all comes together to build the barn back up again, and they all have a meal together to celebrate at the end. So I thought that was a nice story in general, and I thought that would be good for Pennsylvania. Next is Maryland. We lived in Maryland for a while. Both of my older kids were born there, so of course we also had to get some books about Maryland. So we have B is for Blue Crab. Connected to that, these are ones I've read before, and these are Chadwick the Crab Treasury. I had read them, the first one before, and I could only find it the Treasury version, but those are fun. They're fun stories about a blue crab and his Chesapeake Bay friends. And then we also read The Flag Maker, which is about making the American flag that inspired Francis Scott Key. I'm pretty sure, War of 1812, I want to say Fort McHenry, but I might be wrong. You could comment and let me know below. They made a giant flag to fly above the fort, and so when it was still there, they knew that the fort hadn't been taken by the British. So it's about the flag maker. The last one from Mid-Atlantic, N is for Nation's Capital. We lived kind of around Washington, D.C. for many, many years. So again, this was important for me to highlight, but also it's the capital of the nation. So even though it's technically not its own state, I thought it was important to cover that as well. Next is the South, and we're gonna start with Virginia since we were just in Maryland and DC. I did wanna mention here though, if you're looking at my resource, my list that I've linked below, there are some books on there that we didn't actually cover in our unit. So I'm just gonna show you the ones that we did here, but if you look at that list, there'll be some others, and I'm just leaving them on there so that you can look at them and so that I can reference them in the future. So Virginia, we have O is for Old Dominion. I just have the one. And then I think this is supposed to be Washington, is my guess. Next, we have South Carolina. And so we have, what is, P is for Palmetto in South Carolina. I have Circle Unbroken, which is, I'm gonna read you the back here. It says, as she teaches her granddaughter to sew traditional sweetgrass baskets, a grandmother tells the story of their ancestors in faraway Africa and passes along memories of struggle and freedom. So there we go. I thought it was important to address kind of how there's a large Black population in the Southeast. A lot of them had ancestors that came over and were enslaved, and I thought this was a nice way to address that and talk about them living there today and their connection to those ancestors. So, but they are a significant part of the South and what the South is. And then Turtle Tracks, this one's fun. This is about sea turtles laying their eggs, and there's people there that will go to the beaches and help protect the turtle eggs and make sure that they make them back, as many as they can make it back to shore without like disturbing them. So that's really cool, and that's what this is about. And down to Georgia. Now my choice on some of these states, because we don't have a specific connection to most of them, was just where I could find like books that I liked on. So that's really the sole reason that these had like books that interested me. So P is for peach. There, Georgia alphabet book. So yeah, I told you that series would come up a lot. This one is cool. This is And the Tide Comes In, Exploring a Coastal Salt Marsh. It's, if I'm remembering correctly, a story of a girl visiting from somewhere else, her friend that lives here, and her friend shows her the marshes and how they go in and out and everything and all the things that live there. So I liked this quite a bit. And this would also be good for, you know, some sort of ecology study or science, learning about marshes. And then The Life and Times of the Peanut, because there are peanut farms in Georgia, in case you didn't know. Peanuts are so cool. I wish we could grow them here. I might just try at some point, but I don't think we have a long enough season. They grow in such a cool way. I'm a little obsessed with plants, so I won't digress too much. But I have this book about honeybees, and I saw it about peanuts, and I thought that would just be a fun addition. Okay, next is Florida. I have quite a few books on Florida just because I feel like Florida is distinctive from a lot of other states. So, S is for Sunshine. Sam the Sea Cow, which is a story about a little sea cow who's exploring everything. There's a moment where I was worried that either Sam or his mother were not going to be okay, but everything turns out okay, so it's good. Okay, this is She Sang Promise, the story of Betty Mae Jumper, Seminole tribe leader, and she's just a fun person to learn about. Parrotfish and Sunken Ships, Exploring a Tropical Reef. And The Everglades by Jean, is it Jean Craighead George? A bunch of books by them. Yeah. And the pictures are so beautiful. If you've been watching me for a while, you must have heard me talk about beautiful pictures over and over again in books. They really get me. So I think that's it for Florida, the Everglades. And then I also have a bunch for Louisiana because, again, another different, distinct culture there. So I got P is for Pelican. Petite Rouge, which is a Cajun Red Riding Hood. I thought that was fun. Although I have to say that's in like kind of a Cajun, they tried to write it in a Cajun dialect. It was not easy to read. I don't know if you could see any of that, but my New Englander accent had trouble with that, but I tried my best. We have Deep in the Swamp, which is another just fun. This is the Okefenokee Swamp. And that was fun. Okay. All right, and then I have a couple that are more based in New Orleans. So we have Trombone Shorty. And a couple that talk a little bit about Katrina, and I did talk about it with my kids too. So this is a storm called Katrina. And these are not so much focused on the devastation of the storm as in the resilience of the people and how they overcame. Just like a factual story of what happened too, and a story of how they overcame it. We've got Marvelous Cornelius. I really liked this one. I didn't know. My understanding is this is based on a real person who was a garbage person who like danced and made music while he was collecting the garbage. So this is based on real person Cornelius Washington, and it was a really special and inspiring story. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely look up this book and look him up in general. Next is the Midwest. There are a lot of states in the Midwest, and to be honest, they're some of the hardest for my kids to learn. I don't know really why, but that's what it is. So in the Midwest, we covered Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. There seems to be a debate as to whether Arkansas is in the Southeast or the Midwest. The book we had, the Encyclopedia, included it in the Midwest, so that's what I did. I'm going to do something a little bit different than I did for the other regions thus far, and that is I have a couple books that are generally about the Midwest that I wanted to share with you. So first is Paddle to the Sea. We did not do this year because we did it the year before when we were learning about physical geography, but I think this would be a really great one to do this year. Now, this is one of the books by Holling C. Holling, I believe. Clancy Holling. This is a beautiful rendition. He did beautiful artwork. It's really good to do as part of a Charlotte Mason education because you can just do one page a day. Basically, each page has its own picture and one page and that are pretty short and great for narrating and everything. I would be aware that this is an older book and does have some stereotypes about Native Americans in particular, that if you're going to do it, you're going to want to address with your children. So I just want to put that out there. And that is true of the next one too, because it's also a hauling book, and that is Men of the Mississippi. And this doesn't just cover the Midwest, but starts, I don't know if you know this, I learned this, that the Mississippi actually starts out in the lakes of Minnesota and then comes down to where we know the Mississippi goes. So it doesn't just cover the Midwest, but goes all the way down, obviously, to Louisiana. And yeah, so, but those I think are really good additions just because it talks in such detail about the physical geography of what's happening in those areas, as well as well, okay, so this one is a canoe that was carved and goes out to sea. And this one is not a sea turtle, a snapping turtle. Min is the snapping turtle, and she travels down the Mississippi. So it's through their eyes, and I just think they're really good physical geography books. And again, old, I would be careful of some of the stereotypes, especially of Native Americans, but I think there's still a lot of good in there, so that's why I'm recommending them. I also have The Prairie That Nature Built, and I could have tacked this on to really any of the states here. I'm not sure what exact state the author is in here or was envisioning, but any of these prairie states. This is just a really cool book. It's one of those that, like, it keeps, well, this happens, not all the pages are like this, but this goes this way. Keeps adding on, if that makes sense. It's got that kind of rhythm to it where this is the this that does the this and blah, blah, blah. It's got lots of different creatures in it, and it shows how the whole prairie ecosystem works. So it's very cool. Okay, time for the states that we covered in the Midwest. I'm gonna start with Ohio. I've got B is for Buckeye and Johnny Appleseed, which is a great kind of legend. I don't know if he's a folktale. I mean, I think he was an actual person. He's not like Paul Bunyan. He wasn't like gigantic, but I think he might have been exaggerated a bit. But it's a fun story. Johnny Appleseed, who went around planting apple seeds. For Illinois, we got Prairie Numbers, an Illinois alphabet. So I just kind of switched it up a bit here. I'm sure they had a alphabet one for Illinois, but I got the number one because I got W is for Windy City. So again, it's the same series, but this is on the city of Chicago. So, which I feel like is an important part of the Midwest to cover. Then we did Michigan. Again, I found some really cool books from Michigan. So we started with M is for Mitten. My kids can identify Michigan really easily because it does look like a mitten and they really like that. I have Magic Trash, which is another biography, story of Tyree Guyton and his art. I hope I'm saying that right. And this takes place in Detroit. This is Mackinac Bridge and the story of Mackinac Bridge being built. Before that was just a ferry. And I don't know if you know about Mackinac Island, but it's an island off of the Upper Peninsula, I think. Well, or maybe between the Upper and Lower Peninsula. So Michigan is like, there's the Lower Peninsula and then there's the Upper Peninsula that kind of comes out, and they're separated in Lake Michigan's there, right? So it's an island, and it's not really a time capsule because they do have a lot of modern stuff there, but what they don't have is motorized vehicles. So everybody travels around on bikes and with horses and horse-pulled carriages. And it really is kind of a vacation spot in my understanding. I think a lot of the people have second houses there and live there during the summer, but it looks so beautiful and so fun. And so I really want to go one day. So that was just me interjecting that into this very long video. But anyway, Mackinac Bridge. Next one, The Legend of Michigan. It is a beautifully done book. I like the story. I don't think the author, I might be wrong. Maybe I am. If I am, let me know. I don't think the author is native, but it nonetheless is a beautiful, beautiful story. Next is Minnesota. So I have V is for Viking, which also my son loves to study Vikings, so thought that would draw him in. And Northwoods Girl, which is a story about a girl with her grandmother and them just kind of exploring the woods. Moving south a little bit, we got more prairie stuff. We did Kansas. Now, of course, like, again, so many states in the Midwest, so we didn't cover all of them, but Kansas is the last one I covered. And this is S is for Sunflower. Aunt Minnie in the Twister, which seemed like a good way to address the whole Tornado Alley thing. everything turns out okay in this one too. I mean, it does, there is a tornado that comes through, but everybody's safe. And then this last one, the buffalo are back, could again be for any of the states in the plains in that area. It would probably work really well for like the Dakotas and that whole area too. And this is a Jean Craighead George book, and I love this series. We also have the wolves are back and the eagles are back, and I love it. So well done. The buffalo are back. I highly, highly recommend this series of books. Next is the Southwest. So this includes Oklahoma, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. And I actually have books for all of them, so let's go. For Oklahoma, I have S is for Sooner. Now for Oklahoma, I sometimes think of it as like more of the Midwest, similar to like Nebraska and Kansas. But I guess there's a lot of like cowboys and stuff there. This is Jingle Dancer, which is actually, I think it is actually written by a native author. And yeah, it's a beautiful book about jingle dancing at powwows. And then this is The Cloud Artist. And this is a Choctaw tale, and it has, I believe, the Choctaw language in it as well, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, it's, I don't know if it's called if it's called Choctaw or what the name of the language is, but they have it down there, along with obviously I read the English, and it's a fun story about a girl who can make shapes in the clouds. For Texas, I have, this is Texas, and it's just, Texas is, again, is so big. And I don't have a lot of books on it. I probably should have gotten more books on some of the different cities and stuff, but I didn't. I got this one, so to give kind of just like an idea of Texas. And then this one's really fun. This is called Armadillo Rodeo. I love Jan Brett's books, so the little armadillo wants to be in the rodeo. Arizona and New Mexico, I actually don't have the alphabet or number books for these ones. This is a Desert Giant about saguaro cacti. And yeah, it's a cool book. Lots of cool information in here. Also kind of about like the ecosystem around the cactus and all that. So because I was trying to cover physical features and physical geography of the United States, as well as the, you know, political boundaries of the states, I of course wanted to cover the Grand Canyon. So this is a really cool book, Grand Canyon by Jason Chin. It's won all sorts of awards. But it's trying to think of how to describe it. You kind of move up and down the different levels of the Grand Canyon, and they have like entirely different, maybe not entirely different, but different ecosystems there. And so it goes through some of the things that you'll find at the different levels, like the different rocks that's there, the different animal life and plant life that are there. And so it's a father and daughter hiking the trail. And again, with the pictures, let's see, I can't even show you this whole one on the screen. Isn't that so cool? Anyway, I have not myself been to the Grand Canyon, but it's on my list for one day. In the meantime, I'll read books. I didn't this time, but I'm sure you could also find some great videos online about the Grand Canyon. This is Over and Under the Canyon, so it's not specifically about the Grand Canyon, but just about canyons as a as an ecosystem, I guess, as a place in general. These last three, I believe, are for New Mexico. So we have Through Georgia's Eyes. This is about Georgia O'Keeffe, who ended up in New Mexico. So you might know her for her giant, like close-up flower paintings, but she also, well, she moved to New Mexico and lived there for many years, and also did ones with, you know, skulls and desert landscape pictures as well. She loved it there. So Georgia O'Keeffe, Shaped by Her Hands, is about the native potter. She was the Tiwa Pueblo, and Maria Martinez. I'm pretty sure she's since passed on, but she passed on her. So this is co-authored by her great-granddaughter, and how she like kind of learned the traditional pottery of their people, and created black pottery. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since we read the book, I believe it's something that her people did, but she kind of like recreated it by accident, and then people loved it. And so she then passed that tradition on in her family. and in her people. Congratulations, we've gotten through most of the states because these western states are really big, so there's not as many of them. Next, we are doing the Rocky Mountain region. This isn't always its own region, sometimes just like lumped in with the Pacific Northwest or other places, but it really, to me, is different from those places. So in this region, we're doing Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Nevada. Again, I don't have books for every one of those, but we did learn about all of them. We're going to start with Colorado. This is, again, one of the alphabet books. C is for Centennial. My water comes from the Rocky Mountains. And honestly, the quality of this book could have been a little bit better. I don't actually love the drawings in them. This is like sketched out, and they'd be beautiful in like a nature journal. The book to me doesn't feel like it's finished the way it is. Maybe it's the text too. But it's basically, it's less so about the state. It's more just about how the water comes from the snowmelt in the Rockies. And I thought it was a good thing to touch on because of all the issues today with water out west and the droughts they've been having. So I wanted to talk a little bit with my kids about where the water comes from. For Wyoming, we have Volcano Dreams, a story of Yellowstone. We also did read about Yellowstone in our national parks book that I showed you earlier. And this is just exactly what it sounds like. It's just about Yellowstone, but it's also how it came to be formed with the volcano and everything. So that's Volcano Dreams. The last one for this region is really cool and I highly recommend it. And it is Locomotive by Brian Floca. I think, hopefully I'm saying his name right. It is so cool. So it is about the railroads, the transcontinental railroads, and how they were built from here, like from the west and the east, and they met here. And it's like taking a journey from Missouri, from the Mississippi River, all the way over to Sacramento. And it's also about them building it, and then like what would happen when you took the journey. And it was just really cool to read through, and it's evocative. It's really evocative, going through all the different landscapes of the region. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. Okay, now let's talk about the Pacific Northwest and California. So I'm of course lumping California in with Washington, Oregon, when in reality California has, parts that are considered Pacific Northwest all the way down to Southwest. It's a very big state with a lot of different areas, but that's just how I have organized it. I have books on Washington. I don't have any in Oregon. I feel like they're somewhat similar. I had one book that I couldn't find because my 3-year-old really liked it, and I'm assuming she put it somewhere, but it's The Hike. I'll insert a picture here somehow. It's a newer book, and it's just a book about 3 kids going on a hike together and kind of the things they find. It's a really good book to read maybe before you go on a nature walk. So that's a fun one that I believe was written in and about Washington. Then I also have Eagle Boy, which is a native story based on Northwest Coast tales about the bald eagle. And it's a beautifully done story as well. So yeah, there we go. And then I have a bunch for California. So let's start with this one. G is for Golden, alphabet book. This is Pop's Bridge, and this is about the building of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So it's in some ways it was similar to the Mackinac Island Bridge book that we have. So that was interesting. You could like compare and contrast a little bit that. Okay, next is Redwoods by Jason Chin. The redwoods are so cool, and this is a lot of fun facts about redwoods, but told in a really engaging way, I think. My kids thought it was so cool, as did I. And the last one for California here is John Muir Wrestles a Waterfall, and it's a story about John Muir observing this waterfall, and then one night he goes and he like stands in the waterfall pretty much. And I think he almost dies, because, but he doesn't, so all ends up well, but not something I would recommend doing. And of course, we cannot forget our two non-contiguous states, Alaska and Hawaii. So I'm going to start with Alaska. This is a really cool book. This is Arctic Lights, Arctic Nights, and it goes through the year and tells you, so it starts in the summer solstice, how many hours of daylight and how many hours of darkness, and just a description of what's happening there at the time. And it goes, to the winter solstice. It goes through many days in between as well, but you can see the winter solstice here. And then, so it shows you a sunrise, sunset, average high and average low. Look at that. That is pretty cold. And then works its way back to the summer solstice. So it's just a really, really cool book. This one is Whale Snow, and this incorporates some native stories. So this is about the Inupiaq people, I believe. It has some of the Inupiaq language in it, which is really nice, and talks about how they traditionally get whales during a whale snow. So, and then celebrate together. And the last book I have for Alaska is The Great Serum Race. Of course, this is about the story where Balto, which is the most famous dog, but not the only dog, and team, they raced across to get medicine to the town of Nome, I believe, yes. It's really cool. They have information on the back about how far each of the mushers and dogs went. And there's actually another dog that actually went a lot farther than Balto. Balto led the last leg of the journey, so ended up being the most famous. But anyway, this was a really cool book to read. And then moving on to Hawaii, the last state that we covered. This is just a kind of a fun little one. I think it's better for younger kids. This is Aloha. It's like goes from aloha is how we say hello, and aloha is just a lot of different things about Hawaii. And the pictures I think are also evocative with all the color. So it's like a really simple, I don't think this would be my #1 recommendation for Hawaii, but it's there. This is one of my kids' favorites. This is Punia and the King of Sharks, a Hawaiian folktale. And it's about a boy who has to trick the King of Sharks to get, is it lobsters or something like that, or crabs? There we go. So it's a fun story. We've got the story of Hula, and this came with a CD, which was cool, which reads aloud the story and has some music behind it, so that's kind of nice. And I think this is a nice one too, because Hula is part of the native Hawaiian culture. The native Hawaiian culture and history, I should say. I'm gonna try to keep the baby occupied for this last book. This is The Island Below the Star. This is a story of a legend of how Hawaii was found. It's about a bunch of brothers who navigated the seas and found the island below the star, which I believe is supposed to be Maui. It's the biggest one. And if you've seen Moana, this might be a fun add-on to that, because it's about those same people of the Pacific who were able to navigate using, the stars and the birds and the winds and all that. So yes, it's a nice legend book. If you've gotten this far in the video, thank you so much, and leave a comment below letting me know what state or country you currently live in. Until next time, I hope you all stay well, and I will talk to you later. Bye.